Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Coaching. My name is Kim Britz, International Leadership Coach, Trainer and Facilitator, and host to the Lunchtime series where we add value to people's lives happening every day at 12 on ebizradio.com. Today we're chatting to international coach. She's also an author, writer, speaker, and specifically work with women and ethnic leadership. She helps you reach or push past that glass ceiling. Please welcome to the show, Hira Ali. How are you, Hira?
Hello, thank you so much. I am very well. Thank you for inviting me, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So to kick it off, don't you want to introduce yourself, tell us more about you and what it is we're talking about today?
Okay, so I am, as you already introduced, a career and leadership coach. I'm also an author. I have written a book called Her Way to the Top, A Guide to Smashing the Glass Ceiling. That was published 2 years ago, and I am now in the process of writing my second book called Her Allies. I specialize in, or I would say my keen interest is around women and ethnic minority leadership. I am really passionate about supporting marginalized communities and helping them smash the glass ceiling. So whatever I do, all my work is around that goal, whether it is women empowerment, closing the gender gap. I run surveys to capture the experience of women, ethnic minorities, or write books, articles, and yeah, that's pretty much about me.
Amazing. So, I mean, with today's conversation, speak to us about a bit of leadership challenges that women and in marginalized communities experience. Because, as a theme, I think in the last couple of years, it's been brought to the foreground, and what we're starting to notice in governments, in a lot of corporates, is really finding diversity and inclusion and the importance of that, but also pressing upon the importance of leadership within a woman or woman community and female leaders in the world. So speak to us about that and sort of touch on the challenges that women do really go through.
So it's a combination of internal and external challenges, as my research evidenced when I surveyed 300 women across the globe. And I asked them about the top challenges holding them back. And this is also consistent with my own experience, because I'm originally from Pakistan, where I was working in working with a lot of women leaders. And I was moved to Dubai, and I was there for 6 years and working with women. And then I moved to London, and everywhere, every country that I worked in, I was actually seeing a very consistent trend in the challenges faced by women. And that's the reason why I decided to do my survey and write a book about it. And the survey again was alarmingly, the results were very consistent, irrespective of geography. They were the same things that women were facing as obstacles in the career. So internal challenges are basically internal barriers or obstacles which women may have developed over time as a result of the way they've been raised, the way they've been conditioned because of culture, society, the way they've been treated throughout decades. Women have very gendered specific roles to fulfill in our society. So as a result of which they have developed these internal obstacles, and some of them include impostor syndrome, fear of missing out, perfectionism, there's a self-promotion gap, other than the question, am I good enough? There's always this thing that, I'm not going to step up for opportunities unless I'm 100%, I'm 100% sure, or I perfectly fit the role. Women would shy away from stepping up in opportunities. So those kind of things, well, it would be unfair to say that it is just the internal challenges, because of course there are a host and plethora of external challenges which women experience as well. And that's of course, systemic inequalities, and there's sexism, and then there is misogynist work environments, lack of infrastructure, the places where they work in, the places that we all work in, women and men work in, they're primarily designed for men, and of course not a lot of organizations take into account that women may have career breaks. They go away to have children, and then when they come back, they suffer a huge penalty called, the motherhood penalty, as a result of which their salary is impacted. So it's, and then there's harassment, there's bullying, there's microaggression. So really, it's a lot. And I think one thing which was interesting was that when I did my research, I discovered that it's not just women who experience these challenges, but a lot of marginalized communities, particularly Black, Asian, ethnic minority groups, they also similarly face a combination of internal external challenges where they may suffer from imposter syndrome, and all of these internal challenges are intertwined. So if you have imposter syndrome, then you probably have perfectionism, and you would shy away from self-promotion, and you would also experience fear of failure, fear of judgment, vulnerability. So these are all sort of interlinked, and this is something which I discovered not just in women, but also in ethnic minorities. We launched a gray area, in 2019. We captured the results of ethnic minorities working in public and private sector. So the results revealed that, again, there was a lot of racism and systemic inequalities, and then, imposter syndrome and perfectionism and all that. So it's just fascinating to see how marginalized communities sort of have very common challenges amongst themselves.
I find it so interesting because I've recently spoken to one of the CEOs doing great things in the sub-Saharan Africa kind of region. And as CEO, she mentioned, I asked her, how do you create that work-life balance? And she said she said, hang on, before I answer, can I ask you a question? And it was based on the fact that, do you ask men the same question? What I find interesting, and that's why this topic is so interesting for me, is as a man, I think, I also have grown up in an environment where I also have those mental biases and the assumptions that goes with that. And you kind of go innocently asking the question, and yet it's such a real profound moment that we really need to start bringing to the foreground, that as a human race and culturally in the last 50 years, we have been brought up with this idea that men are a certain way and women are a certain way, and we come with a set of rules and a certain set of responsibilities. Do you think there is, because of this, do you think there's a bit of an unfair disadvantage that women really need to go through and sort of have to show up in a way that's unfair, really?
That's true. So we have all been, I think, raised, and then this is something which I thought was maybe a cultural thing. But when I moved to UK, I realized that this is a global issue. It's not something which is only pertinent to certain cultures or certain countries. It's basically a universal thing, that we've all been raised and brought up and conditioned to believe that women have the role of being a nurturer. She's supposed to bring niceness to the table. They're supposed to be, not very. And I would say, for men, the word is assertive. For women, it's unfortunately aggressive. But that's what they're expected to, sort of play within the roles that have been defined for them. And if they sort of step outside that role, and there's dissonance and people don't accept them the way they are, and whether they're successful or whether they're not successful, either way, it's difficult for them, because if they are too successful, then they're ambitious and they're aggressive and they don't care about the family. And if they are not successful, then they're underconfident and they're weak and they're vulnerable and they're not too strong to be leaders. So it's a challenge, and I'm glad you asked that question, because honestly speaking, I think it's not just women who suffer from these gender stereotypes, men too, because men have always been raised to be providers and rock solid, and they are supposed to take care of the family. And especially in the pandemic, when a lot of people lost their job, these kind of stereotypes didn't they were very harmful, because what if you lose your job? You can't provide for your family. So that's just this unrealistic expectation that men can't cry, men can't be weak, and it's just, I think the whole system is, to be honest, quite flawed. And that brings me to my second book, which I'm writing, because if, Kevin, you are interested in knowing how you as a man can support women and stop asking these questions and knowing what to do, what's right, then I have written this book for you. My book
Yay.
is called Hira Ali,
Yeah.
and it's actually very different in the sense that it's targeted towards men. And this is the first sort of, I mean, I don't think so. There are a lot of leadership books in the market which, yes, involving men and as allies has always been in the conversation for a long time. But this book actually is a toolkit for men, and how they can lead through advocacy and how they can be better allies for women. So it talks about everything, from the kind of gender stereotypes that we're raised with. And mansplaining and man-interruptions and a lot of harmful stereotypes. And it's not really a sort of an accusatory book where I get confrontational or I ridicule men and say this is what you need to do. It's a very friendly conversation sort of book in which I invite them to be part of the conversation and make them aware of all the small and the big things they can do to support women in leadership. So I'm going to definitely share the link. It's going to be out in the first week of March.
Absolutely, that's going to be fantastic. And please, share it with me. I can share it on my social media. We'll definitely share that because I think it's a necessary conversation. With my own naivety and also, just learning through this process, I'm also learning, what conversations are important and where my biases lie, and the sensitivity around it, and or even the cognizance and just acknowledgement of it. But just to shift gears a little bit, what do you think for you, being in this position where you've gone to this extent, it's what you do around executive coaching and working with women. What are some of the biggest lessons that you as a woman in leadership today, what is one of those barriers in your career that you've overcome?
So I think one of the things which is actually quite fascinating, because you talk about your biases as a man, Kevin, and while writing this book, I realized that it's not just men who have biases against women. Women also have biases against other women because we have been raised in a certain way that, and I'm not the only one, because I was almost very afraid to confess this. But when I talked, when I listened to TEDx talks and I read books about famous women leaders who confess to having these biases against other women, even though they are in HR, they're D&I experts, they're leaders, but they themselves have this thing that, okay, this is what the women are supposed to do, and this is what women are not supposed to do. I think it's that thing also, like, overcoming your own internal barriers, your own challenges. I think that's always been a thing for me. It's been important for me. And because I have worked in different countries and built my leadership brand from scratch, from ground zero, in not just one market, but a couple of markets. So I think getting that visibility, I think women tend to shy away from putting themselves on the pedestal and talking about themselves, which I'm not afraid of. I love self-promoting, so because I believe that's important. So I think these are some of the challenges which I had to personally deal with. And of course, there is this fear of missing out. Am I being a good mom, a good wife? Am I taking care of my house? Everything is spot on. So that's also another concern for especially moms. Like, am I balancing my career with my family? So that is something which I guess men don't think about as much. But now COVID-19 has changed that, and men are thinking about it. So that's a great shift. But yeah, again, like I said, a number of challenges sort of surface, and one of my strong belief is that once you master your internal barriers, then you're in a better position to address the external ones.
So one of the things that that I always find fascinating, because it really speaks true to why we become eventually who we become, and it's always a case of going, from an external perspective, someone looks into your story and goes, wow, look at what she does, look at how she does it, look at all the things she's doing. Did you ever have, in terms of being inspired by someone, have you ever been inspired by a woman in leadership or someone in the world that really made you kind of go, yeah, this is what I want to do, this is who I want to be. Who is that, and why does this person inspire you?
So I think if I start from my own family, my own mom has been my own inspiration. I mean, she's not really somebody who's worked in an organization, but she has a very strong personality and she's very resilient. And I think that's always been very inspiring for me. She's passed it on to me to be able to stand up in front of people and voice your opinions. I've always been surrounded by strong feminist men. So that's also always been inspiration. Growing up, I wouldn't say I had a lot of female role models to look up to. Role models, yes, of course, but not like women leaders in powerful positions. Because 15 years back, when I started my career, honestly, there weren't a lot of women around me to look at. But there were some people in family, friends, working for the government and the public sector. Then I came from a country where you had the first female prime minister. So that in itself was inspiring, that a woman of color was able to lead the country. So if she can, so can I. And lately, as we have seen after the US elections, people that has really raised the aspirations of young girls who are now looking forward to one day being in charge, irrespective of their color, their background, their faith, their ethnicity. So I think, so growing up for me, I think the strongest influence was that of my family, because they're the ones who made me believe that you can achieve everything, and always encouraged me to do things. And then outside that, of course, it would be like, political leaders, like I said, in my own country, or even globally, a lot of sort of female leaders who you admire and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And especially women of color, because then you get inspiration and you feel that, okay, so if they can, so can I. Then you get to dream big.
So, I mean, I love that, and I think my mother was also one of my inspirations in who she was and her approach to certain things. The one thing I remember just off the top of my head, she always said, "If it's to be, it's up to me." And I never really. It's like I always like, well, what? So I've got to do all the damn work, Ma. And she's like, yeah, you have to do it. If you want to make it happen, you have to do the work. But I mean, it's just a side note now, just, listening to what you're saying, what advice do you have, being in this position, being a woman in leadership, what advice do you have for any young woman entering a sort of a male-dominated profession? Because, if we look at professions in the world today, I can't think of any that's any job that a man can do that a woman can't do. So they're infused. There are so many roles that's for example, the tech industry. There are so many female tech sort of computer boffins and geeks out there that can do stuff, and it really doesn't matter what gender they are. But as a woman in leadership, how do you enter a predominantly male environment? I mean, like, what advice can you give some young entrepreneurs and business owners out there?
So I think mindset is very important, and to be able to believe in yourself is very important. When I started my job like 14 years back, I was the only young woman with 22 men who were twice my age, working in a department. And it was difficult, yes, because obviously, I came from a culture and background where if they would go out for lunch, I wouldn't want to go out with 22 men for lunch. So I would always kind of create opportunities which were inclusive. Because I worked in that environment, I think I sort of learned to create opportunities for myself and, fight for myself. I know that this is not something I can do. I'm not comfortable about going out to company lunches or dinners with 22 men, but, you can order something at home, or you can have family get-together. So I think I sort of really turned around things in a way that would make me part of that system. I don't feel secluded, but at the same time, I would do things my way. So I think what is important is to know, even if you are working in a perfectly male-dominated department or industry, knowing what, your own capabilities, your own potential, your own boundaries is important, and making sure that you're assertive and not let anybody cross those boundaries and cross that space, and making sure that people respect you the way you are, even if you are the youngest and the only woman in the room. Never be afraid to step up and speak your mind. And of course, when you speak your mind, that how you speak is very important. That has always been, I think, a reason which and I think that's something which I would actually pass on to my parents, because the way you speak is important. The way you get somebody to join you in a conversation, agree with you, is important. You don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be, you have to say it in a way that people listen to you. So there has to be empathy involved. You have to be respectful, uh, and yeah, just sort of balance it, understand all points of view, and then present what you're saying. So I think that's important. But the way you frame conversations as a woman, you always need to, unfortunately, do that. Be conscious of the way you come across to people. So that's always been important to me. But yeah, just sort of go ahead and step up. Never be afraid to hear no. I think that's the key, because as women, we're very afraid. What if that person says no? Understand this, that a no now does not mean a no forever. It's just a temporary no, and you could probably get that thing after 6 months or a year or 2 years. So pursue your dreams, pursue your um, objectives, and be visible. Build your leadership brand, show people that what you're doing, showcase your talent. That's really important.
It's amazing. So just to tie all this up together today, you know, Lunchtime series is all about how do we add value to people's lives. And we know that 2020 was what it was, and I think we've learned some very dear lessons and some very important lessons. But heading into 2021, what do you tell leaders of the world today, and what do you think people should really, if you could give us three points on what we should really, from a male perspective, from a female perspective, what should we pay attention to and start really recognizing around the importance of leadership in women?
So I think going forward, resilience is always going to be the key for all leaders, whether you're a man or a woman, irrespective of your gender. It's going to be important. Your mindset is important. So positivity and gratitude, and of course, there are a lot of different strategies which go under resilience. But that's one of the things which you need to know, that even if you do fall down, even if you experience temporary bumps, it's all right to feel dismissive and feel sad and depressed, but get up and get going. Flexibility and adaptability is important, pivoting according to what the industry needs. I remember last year I was all prepared with a whole set of articles and talks around women leadership, but then COVID-19 happened, and then I changed my writing, and literally over days I sort of came up with stuff which was more in line with what people wanted to read. So you may have worked hard on something, but something happens, like a crisis that we're now experiencing, and you may have to pivot. So always be ready to be flexible and adaptable, and get in with the change early on, because the earlier on you get in with the change, the easier it is going to be for you, versus just waiting until the end. So flexibility and adaptability. And number three is empathy. Empathy is something we have seen that, a lot of countries with female leaders have been doing well. And I'm not going to get into this debate that women are better leaders than men, because I don't think so. I believe that women and men have their own specific leadership competencies. But yes, empathy, which is a very women specific trait, is going to be important going forward. So yes, always remember to be empathetic, because that's what's going to, especially in a difficult time like this, leaders really need to be very attuned to the needs of people and the challenges they're going through.
Absolutely. Hira, thank you. That was fantastic. I love that you have this stance. I'm learning as we go along. You're probably the third woman this month that I've spoken to around leadership and the importance of it. And why this conversation needs to happen, and needs to happen regularly, and the awareness around leadership, women leadership in the world. If we want to get hold of us, so you mentioned your book. Tell us where we can get your book. When your book comes out, it's coming out in March, and you also online. Tell us all your info.
So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Advancing You. That's my handle for all three. Then on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I'm there as Hira Ali Coach. And my book is Her Way to the Top, A Guide to Smashing the Glass Ceiling, which is already available on Amazon. And the next one will probably be available in another month's time. So yeah, if you follow me, then you will sort of know when the second one is coming out too.
Fantastic, guys. And as mentioned, Hira Ali Coach will be, all the information will be on in the description boxes below. Check it out, watch the video, share the video, and definitely look out for the book. We need some allies, we need allies for women. We'll definitely say that. Hira, thank you so much for joining us, and let's catch up soon and
Thank you so much, Kevin.